organizations want to hire the best person for the job, no matter where the person comes from. And I do believe people in Canada say that and they mean it. The challenge is the word best. What is best? How do we measure it? And that's where people run into difficulties, because what some people would consider as best may not be what other people consider as best. Remember the technical skills versus soft skills and the relative importance of technical skills and soft skills in that situation. So at the line manager, this is an important point when you are helping people find jobs. It's important to remember that if you have hired the wrong person, as the person who will manage that person, it's going to be hell. It's going to, why do people hire someone? Well, it's usually they have too much work. So they want to be able to delegate some work to someone else. If they've hired the wrong person, what happens? It creates even more work for them. So it has the opposite effect of the intended goal. So people will be typically conservative when they hire during the recruitment process, because they want to make sure they're going to get someone who they will be able to work with. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of work. So the labor market is a market, supply and demand. So what does it mean? Well, it will be much easier to place people in organizations where there's a labor shortage. That's very obvious. And it is easier for immigrants to find jobs in sectors that experience labor shortages. So if you want to place people, you can add value. Essentially, the value you add is reducing their recruiting cost. You can help them by pre-screening, and you can help them by having some form of testing of people, or you can give them recommendations. And if you've built some credibility with people, then that recommendation can help. When I worked for Xerox, remember I told you yesterday, I had 14 technicians working for me, one after the other. And the reason I was able to help a number of them find jobs inside the organization was I got the reputation of somebody who can test people out, in essence. So on 4 occasions, the pilot plant manager came to me and said, Lionel, we're going to start a new project. We're going to need another technician. Any of the people who worked for you any good? And so I would tell him, well, the person I have right now is great, or the person I have right now is not so good, but the previous one was great. Okay, so his answer was, well, arrange an interview on Monday. Okay, and of the 4 people I recommended, 3 got the job. 1 didn't, because he had been a plant manager in Serbia, and he really came with the, remember the how do you call that? Professional support job manual. He was exactly in that situation. He was getting into the support situation because there was a technician position, and Bill came back to me and he said, well, if I hire this guy, it's going to take me a year to train him, and he's going to leave in 18 months. So I will only get 6 months worth of work out of him. So it's not going to work. Yeah. The other 3 got the job. And so the part which was important is developing that reputation and credibility as when you give a recommendation, that recommendation is accurate. That really helps a lot. So it really helps. I find that I will encourage all people who work in the not-for-profit sector to try get some corporate experience if you can, or at least network with people in the corporate sector so you understand how they evaluate. I remember one lady, she was managing a program in Toronto, and the way she it was an IT program for IT people. So she wasn't in IT herself, but she found 2 IT recruiters, and she would meet with them kind of once a month for an hour and a half. And she would bring a stack of resumes, and she would say, well, tell me, where can this person work? Based on what you see on technical skills, which direction should this person go? And in 30 seconds, they would give her information that would take people weeks to find out on their own because of their knowledge of the industry. So that can help a lot. If you're trying to place people, remember to listen to employers' concerns and needs before. It's just like any type of situation when you're, selling, quote unquote. Well, you first need to understand what people are trying to buy. Okay? Otherwise, it probably won't work. We need to give people the benefit of the doubt. This is one in Alberta that's not too much of a challenge. This one in Ottawa was really a big challenge. I've seen in Ottawa there were a number of people in the not-for-profit organizations who essentially tackle the problem from the perspective as employers discriminate. And they were looking at it as systematically. So it's like, well, if you don't give the corporations the benefit of the doubt, they will not give you the benefit of the doubt. It's not going to work. Okay? So it was a bit of a challenge I found. So where people will be able to get jobs is when the demand is so high that organizations run out of traditional candidates. We already mentioned that earlier. It does make a big difference. Like in my experience, I've seen, like if I take the example of, again, engineering, I mean, I've seen in like around 2010 to 2013, I've seen tons of civil engineers who landed in Calgary or Edmonton and got a job really quickly. And the same people in Toronto would take months to get anywhere because there were too many civil engineers in Ontario, not enough in Alberta. So supply and demand makes a world of difference, that's for sure. Another important point is people, when they try to place, job developers try to place their clients, usually think of organizations. So they target companies. When I worked at Xerox, like Xerox has name recognition, so people wanted to place people at Xerox. The reality is you're not placing them with an organization, you're placing them with a particular person. Because it's that person who will bring people in, take them in and give them a chance. So I find it's important to target individual people as opposed to targeting organizations. So what kind of characteristics are you looking for? I find the people who I find really helpful as potential clients for me are people who, one, have experienced being in what I call the one down position. By one down, I mean you will have to adapt to others, there's no debate. The situation is such that it's obvious to everybody. So that really helps. But it's not enough. People need to have analyzed their experience, meaning like they've realized what happened, and they also need to have some influence on the organization. If people have all three characteristics combined, that is a fantastic person to work with in order to place people. Okay? Why do I say they need to have the ability to analyze their experience? Some people don't. I mean, I will always, like a friend of my wife is Chinese medical doctor. She was a medical doctor in China. She came to Canada. She went through the whole process. She became a medical doctor in Canada. And when I asked her what's the difference between being a medical doctor in Canada and being a medical doctor in China, as far as she's concerned, there is no difference. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't help a whole lot. Again, like this is somebody who had the experience but could not analyze it. Okay? So, if you're going to place people in a new organization, I really encourage you to make sure the first placement will be a success. I think it's fairly obvious. Successes have many parents, failures are orphans, somebody said, and I think that's very true. When I worked at Xerox, I told you I had 14 people. The first one was a fantastic success. Like his first name was Abdi. Abdi went from a 2-month unpaid internship to a 3-month contract, to a 1-year contract, to permanent position, to company award. So, it was like really good progression. The second person I had after Abdi was a lady from, I can't remember if it was Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, and I will bet money that she faked her resume, because when I asked her how much vacation did you get in your home country, she couldn't answer the question. I figured, well, that's the kind of thing usually people know. Okay, like if you've worked, you know how much vacation. She was doing chemical experiments, and it was very clear. Like she didn't really know what she was doing, kind of thing. Okay? So, if that lady had been the first one, there would not have been a second one. I mean, that I'm sure. Fortunately, the first one was such a success, kind of averaged out. Okay, let's try another one. Okay? And I learned how to screen a little better. That was the other thing. So I encourage, if you can, okay, try to follow people until the end of their either first performance appraisal or the end of the probation period to make sure that they get through it successfully. Again, if you can. I know in many cases you have so many clients to deal with that you just don't have the bandwidth. The other thing is some of your clients disappear when they have a job. And like you try to find out where are they and so on. There's like no answer whatsoever. Okay, so that does happen. Okay. So if you, one thing I will encourage all of you to job shadow a corporate recruiter. Okay. In particular, try to understand how they make decisions when they evaluate resumes or during interviews. I find this helps put yourself in their shoes and then convey the information to your clients. Attend corporate or HR conferences because that's where you, and I know some of these conferences can be very expensive. Try to volunteer to get in at a reduced rate. I remember this lady from the Philippines, she was in the telecom industry. She volunteered for a telecom industry conference. And she was able to get in for free when it was $1,800 per person for the conference. So like, it can make a big difference. Yeah. Maybe ask a corporate HR professional to mentor you, okay, or a recruiter. Okay, that can help. All right. So this is a book that I co-wrote with a guy called Don Rutherford. Thank you. So recruiting, retaining, and promoting culturally different employees. This talks about like the challenges more from the recruiter's perspective than from the job seeker's perspective. But if you're a counselor, that can be very helpful. Okay? So, yes, go ahead. Yeah.
I guess if you're a career counselor, I work with recruiters on a monthly basis. I bring them in to do resumes for clients. But when they're here, I also tap them for information, their gold mine of what positions are most hireable, what type of candidates are getting jobs, who's hiring, and they know this ahead of when I see it on job boards. So I highly recommend you cultivate relationships with recruiters who can work with clients in your area. We have also kind of an informal referral thing. I follow them on LinkedIn. I like their posts. They see that I'm doing that, and they share my things. And sometimes I send them informal referrals. So if you're not in the corporate recruiter space, I highly recommend you try to build some relationships there. I find it invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely.